I've very rarely used a video instead of a reading within a worship service. Yet there was something about this particular video, We Are Unitarian Universalist, that communicates both in its graphics and its message, I believe, some important insights about what it could mean to belong to this particular faith community that we call First Unitarian Church of Wilmington and Unitarian Universalism. Now, we like to joke about ourselves as Unitarian Universalists, like the time a visitor to a Unitarian Universalist church sat through a sermon with growing incredulity at the heretical ideas that were being spouted. And after the sermon, a UU member of the church asked the visitor, "So how did you like it?" And the visitor replied, "I can't believe half the things the minister said," sputtered the visitor in outrage. "Oh, good," said the UU, "then you'll fit right in." I appreciate the ways that we joke about ourselves, holding ourselves lightly, sometimes more lightly than others, as long as it doesn't mean, particularly in these times that we are in, that we don't take ourselves and the impact that we could have seriously. We need to take ourselves seriously at this moment. In the film, first there is that ever-flowing line across the screen in the video. That single moving line that conveys the connections that we have with one another, though we may each be holding different beliefs, though we may be each unfolding from different experiences, though we may orient our meaning-making by any one of what we call the sources of our living tradition. The flowing line traces our history, emerging from and still informed by our Jewish and Christian roots, even as we've stretched ourselves within and beyond those roots, as we claim a heritage from the world's religious traditions, science and arts, and transcendent experiences of wonder as well. That line can represent the connection that we feel to our guiding principles and our endeavor to live out those principles with one another and in the varied contexts of our lives. Since, as you know, the root of the word religion from the Latin means to tie or bind together. That flowing line across the screen can also represent what ties us together as a community. Our religious heritages, our guiding principles, our sources, our connection to one another in this community and with other Unitarian Universalists across the globe, in the Philippines, in Poland, in Germany, in Transylvania, in India, and on and on. The line for me also represents our personal and our collective longings. Our sometimes unstated but real longing is to be whole, to be true, to find personal meaning, and to make a real difference in the world. That line proceeds forward, almost dancing across the screen, curving and changing and weaving with other lines. Although we might be tempted to do so, if we are true to our life's complexity and if we're devoted to a dynamic faith, our Unitarian Universalist faith is more than a static timeline, more than a simple storyline could ever convey. In fact, I believe that if we are living a vital life and part of a vital faith, that we never feel like we have arrived. Which reminds me of another UU joke. Visitors on a tour of heaven noticed a group of Unitarian Universalists who were arguing about whether or not they were really there. Yet, I truly believe that our vitality resides in our capacities to attend to our yearnings, to listen to our longings, to ask of ourselves again and again, what more? What's next? Let's hear those phrases resound in this room at the count of 3, okay? What more? What next? One more time. Great. So we need to ask those questions of ourselves, of our congregation, and of our world. To be able to hear the longings within us, to be able to hear the longings among us, I believe keeps us a vital, responsible, and resplendent faith community. My colleague, the Unitarian Universalist minister, Reverend Karen Herring, points out in her article, Belonging to Our Longings, this. Our understanding of longings has so often been linear, she writes, whether we think of longing as a nostalgia for the past or a steady march of progress towards the future. It can be tempting to think of it in a straight line, stretching out in one direction or the other from where we are now. She continues, but longing is more curvaceous and dimensional than this. This is abundantly clear in the natural world, where time does not march but bends around the cycle of seasons, where life itself circles back dust to dust, whether to the earth or of the stars. Not without its own movement or improvement, nature has its own emergent progress that unfolds over time. Each bold new blossom eventually bows back to the ground as seed and rises again as sprout in the spring. Cycles like these create memory and expectation that dance across time, creating an embodied sense of longing in which we each participate as sons and daughters of life longing for itself, as Kahlil Gibran has said. So, in my opinion, when we attend to and allow our own longings to have voice and expression, we can become more conscious participants in our own ongoing personal and spiritual development. And indeed, we can also attune to what wants to unfold in this world through us, so that we truly can be the sons and the daughters of life longing for itself. So that flowing, curvaceous, ever-unfolding line on the screen that we viewed, for me, represents our deeper participation in this unfolding dance of our religion, a dance that we can join that has already begun. Karen Herring asks us to ponder, what would the world be like if we let ourselves belong to our longings? Let's let that question land a little bit as I read it one more time. What would our life be like? What would the world be like if we let ourselves belong to our longings? Did you think of something? Did something come up for you with that question? My hope is that if we allow ourselves to attend to our own longings, that we can keep our own faith vital and also find common ground with one another, even when we might use different words or hold different beliefs or change our beliefs over time. Sometimes we change our beliefs under pressure. Reminds me of another joke. So this confirmed, devout atheist was walking in the woods and reflecting on the randomness of this universe that he was appreciating, the trees and the sky and the birds and the streams. And all of a sudden, this great black grizzly bear arose through the woods. And he saw that, and he scooted out as fast as he could. But the bear chased him and followed him until finally the man fell on the ground and looked up at this big bear right over him and said, "Oh my God, help me." And then there was a silence. And a voice came from the sky and said, "So now you're calling upon me. After all of these years of denying my existence." But this gracious God said, "How can I help you?" And the man said, "Could you make this bear a Christian?" So at that moment, the big black grizzly bear lowered his hands and joined them in prayer and said, "Thank you, God, for this meal which you have prepared for me this day." Now, this video that we showed as well is entitled, "We Are Unitarian Universalists." The accent is on we. While it acknowledges that each of us could tell our own individual story, that individual story video would be entitled, "I Am a Unitarian Universalist." And in that video, the main star of the show would be you, yourself, and I, right? But though we often do put the accent on I, the story about who we are as Unitarian Universalists will often be more broader than the story that we would tell about our own individual selves. For we, as Unitarian Universalists, hold many different beliefs, use many different words to express our beliefs, and draw upon a wide range of what we call the sources of our living tradition. In the story of who we are, we encounter much more diversity, divergence, and difference. Some criticize the diversity of our beliefs by accusing us of trying to create the impression that, well, just about anyone can be a Unitarian Universalist, even you. Yet, actually, it is more challenging to be part of a group that encompasses so much difference in our midst. In the film, the individual lines merge with the lines of various colors to knit into our religious history, our community of diverse beliefs and life experience, and our various expressions of our faith. To declare with one of our historical forebears, the Transylvanian Unitarian Francis David, that you do not have to think alike to love alike. In the context and the times in which we live, this time of rising authoritarianism in our own country and other places around the globe, is not to provide just a warm embrace to one another. It's a subversive idea. You do not have to think alike to love alike. Who we are as Unitarian Universalists includes, obviously, our individual stories and proclivities, but it is more than that as well. We sometimes forget that we have different stories to tell, even in this room. For some of us, the story is some version of the coming out story. I was raised in this particular tradition, or I used to belong to this tradition, but over time I found that I could not say or sing the words, or what is more, pretend I believed in those particular sacred stories. So I drifted, or I ran, or I swam away from that, and I wandered in, or I washed upon the shores of a Unitarian Universalist congregation. And so surprise, 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 here I am. We've heard that story, haven't we? Yes? Yeah. So I don't mean actually to make light of it. For some, this journey towards Unitarian Universalism was a hard-fought and even a painful one, including being disowned by others in one's family or one's former religion. This story is one of finding a home among Unitarian Universalists that might be more of like a story of finding refuge. And sometimes our congregations can feel like refugee camps for religious refugees. There is something comforting about finding a place where you can belong without compromising your integrity, your intellect, or your imagination. Once we have found needed refuge, our congregations can at their best be a greenhouse for continuing clarifying one's own perspectives, finding new meanings for old words, encountering support, and hopefully challenging us as we grow our souls throughout our lifetime. Having received refuge, we often offer refuge to others to find their own path. This was expressed so clearly by the Universalist Edwin Markham in his verses from the poem Unwitted. I've adapted it a little bit. They drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took them in. There is another story that we as Unitarian Universalists can tell of ourselves that's different than this coming out or religious refugee story. An increasing number of people in our country today were not raised in a religion. Rather than trying to get over a religion or relinquish a religion that no longer serves them, they may be looking for something that's explicitly spiritual, that connects them to something that they can't necessarily find on CBS Sunday morning or This Week or Meet the Press. Maybe something that they can't even find in a coffee shop. Some of us may need to develop a new sensitivity that not everyone in today's world grew up with a religious past that they are now disowning. We need to manage our expectations of one another and recognize and appreciate those differing stories in our midst. Increasing number of people today, as I said, were not raised in a religion. Their journey to and within Unitarian Universalism may be one of actually seeking something that might be more explicitly spiritual, that might introduce them to religious traditions and perspectives rather than merely disowning what they never had. These people among us might be honestly seeking ways of understanding the perennial wisdom across religious traditions. These people among us might not be carrying the same baggage that outers might have around religious language. They may find words that speak to their own longings for meaning and connection to something more in life. Without the prior baggage, words like grace or God or divine or sacred or worship might actually allow these people among us, express what before they had no words for. There's a third group among us. Interested? Curious? These are those who rather than subtracting a particular tradition or religious perspective in order to become Unitarian Universalists, find that they're adding one to it. In an increasingly multi-faith world, we are providing a home for those who might explicitly draw inspiration and meaning from Christianity, Buddhism, earth-centered traditions, humanism, atheism, Islam, and Unitarian Universalism. They add to this a particular Unitarian Universalist flavor that might be considered more liberal, more progressive, more humanistic, more justice-oriented, or more pluralistic. They might have like a hyphen in their identity. Fourth, of course, there were those who were raised Unitarian Universalists. Any of those in this room? Just so I can get a sense. Yeah, okay. They have a different story to tell than those who found Unitarian Universalism later in life. And indeed, they may have gone through a time of disowning or re-owning or reclaiming the Unitarian Universalism of their upbringing for whatever reasons, but they want to belong or belong again. In all of these cases, those who are coming out of a tradition towards Unitarian Universalism, those who are coming into Unitarian Universalism without a prior religious background, those adding a hyphen to their Unitarian Universalism by drawing upon other religious traditions as well, and those raised Unitarian Universalists. All of these are finding a way to belong to their longings for something more, something meaningful, something that connects with the unfolding of their life. They are part of that ever-widening circle that we call Unitarian Universalism, which makes some of our generalities about ourselves and some of our jokes about ourselves, although entertaining, not necessarily reflective of contemporary Unitarian Universalists. Peter Block, the community organizer, organizational consultant, in his wonderful book, Community, the Structure of Belonging, adds to our appreciation of what it means to belong by offering a few insights. He writes, belonging can also be thought of as a longing to be. Being is our capacity to find our deeper purpose in all that we do. It is the capacity to be present and to discover our authenticity and our whole selves. This is often thought of as an individual capacity, but it's also a community capacity to be present and to discover our authenticity and whole selves. This is often thought of as an individual capacity, but he declares that it is a community capacity, for community is the container within which our longing is often fulfilled. So, as a community, I want to invite us to participate in a practice this week. I want you to ask yourself, what are my longings? What are my longings? And if you dare, I want to invite you to ask another person, what are your longings? And maybe in that kind of reflection or interaction, we might discover some common ground. We might be able to enter a terrain with one another where we can join our hearts and imaginations, our beliefs and our passions as we move forward. So, in this world that continues to draw so many exclusive circles that shut people out, can we endeavor to model what it means, even in the smallest and sincerest way, to draw a circle that takes others in? This week, may our practice be that of drawing ever wider circles, ever flowing lines and circles, rather than dividing lines. May, in the words of George Light, we do this. Draw the circle wide. Draw it wider still. Let this be our song. No one stands alone. Standing side by side, draw the circle. Draw the circle wide.